Well, I think as parents, the big thing is knowing the game and knowing what they're doing, knowing what they have access to. Like some parents will be like, oh, I didn't realize that there was like a whole chat thing. And I walked in and I saw, them reading whatever.
Be
and
aware.
it's like,
You can't be afraid to parent.
and even with entertainment, we need to train them how to have fun responsibly and how to not go overboard.
Anything that is all consuming is dangerous.
Don't give them access to social media because you think they love Jesus.
This is a battle out there, people, and we have to be aware of what's going on because this is serious.
I would say set the example.
Don't be a Facebook parent. Don't just take pictures and show them. Your friends know that you love your kids, but do your kids know that you love them?
I'm Chuck Tate, and here at Fellowship of Believers, we encourage families, strengthen marriages, and edify the body of Christ.
I'm Larry Grimm. We also promote biblical doctrine in a fun and engaging way.
And I'm Sarah, and if it's Christian, we're talking about it.
This is the Mike Charleston Show. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the Mike Charleston Show. We are Chuckless today.
We are.
There's no Chuck Tate. He's on vacation, visiting family, and doing a family thing.
Seems like he's taking a lot of vacation.
Well, he needs to. He's got a lot of time.
That's true.
Well, it sounds bad, but speaking of time, so this episode it's going to seem like, so especially if you're younger, you're like, oh, they're picking on young people and all this. But actually, this topic, believe it or not, is something that secularists and Christians deal with. The world is dealing with this. A lot of psychologists have studied these things, and a lot of doctors are looking into these things and seeing just the effects that we're going to be talking about. So it's not just a conservative Christian type thing. There are, especially when we're going to talk about the social media aspect, there is a lot of data. There's a lot of people that are very concerned, a lot of parents that are very concerned, a lot of parents and teachers and professionals who aren't necessarily Christian. So that should be a big red flag right there.
A lot of parents who should be concerned who maybe aren't.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of why we wanted to do this. And so we live in a world where the video games are a big part of it. Social media, just media in general, but specifically social media is on the rise. And there's a lot of parents that are clueless. They don't know what to do. So the thing that they usually do is either say yes to everything or say no to everything. Yeah. And it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And so that's what we're going to discuss, is just the what to do, kind of. What's a game plan that you can have? Now, we're not going to give an answer, one size fit all for your families. So if you're looking for, what do you do? Well, it may not work for your family. And so we're going to give you some guidelines, though, and some things that might help. Is that fair? Yeah. That seem about fair?
Yeah, I just thought of, when you were talking, how the history things, because I like history, but
sure.
In the 50s, when TV was new,
right,
and
that's a shocking statement right there.
I know,
right?
So this problem is kind of a modern problem, and TV dinners, the whole frozen dinner.
Oh my goodness,
that came about because people would.
Do they still make those?
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do.
And do people actually eat them?
There's like a whole aisle in the store just for TV dinners.
They're spoiled.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, is you would put your TV dinner in the oven. It was fast. It was already made, and you could sit in front of the TV with your little TV tray,
right,
and eat your dinner. And it was
disgusting food.
Well, it was, but that was kind of the start of the family. That was a big problem back then, because now it was like families didn't sit around and eat dinner together. They would all sit in the living room and eat their disgusting food. And
that's something that people cannot fathom today. Maybe if you're 80 or 90 years old, you remember. But there was definitely a time.
I remember.
No, but people remember a time where there was no TV in the home.
No TV, yeah.
And what did you do during dinner time? Well, we sat together as a family and we made homemade stuff, and it was slowly progressing. But we're not talking about that kind of history right now. But we want to give a game plan, because especially like with video games. So let's talk about the stigma of video games first, because I kind of brought up the subject, and just on cue, Pam and Larry, and I'm not picking on them, but this is exactly the thing. This is kind of why we wanted to bring this up. It was all negative, like, oh, it's a waste of time. It's this, it's that, it's the other. And I'm like, that's the typical response. That's what I was expecting. I wasn't trying to shoot him down or anything, but I'm like, that's why. So I grew up with video games. Like that was my era. Like when video games came out, I was a kid. And so we went from Atari 2600 to Nintendo to Sega Genesis and up into college. And so my generation, our generation, somewhat, you're a little older than I am. And
I was just say, I remember Pong. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I played Pong, yes.
Yeah. And then when I was 12, 13, I got an Atari 2600.
Right.
So
look that up, kids, if you don't know what that is. It's
so for me,
games are lame.
That I got over the video game thing real quick because it
just didn't do anything.
Yeah, by the time the gaming systems got better,
you were already married.
I wasn't married, and I lost interest. It wasn't it didn't have any draw to me. So.
Right. Well, so the video game. So growing up with that, we didn't have like. My parents were more of along the line of just whatever, like they didn't have offensive games yet. They didn't. And my parents didn't want me to spend all day on them. So there was a delicate balance of going outside and playing, in which we did a good number of. And then on rainy days or anything, we would come in, play video games. Yeah. And it just wasn't an issue. It just wasn't an issue. They weren't concerned about, is he going to be spending all day in the basement playing video games? We didn't play in the basement, but the stereotypical video gamer.
Well, we didn't have a basement. We lived in Florida, so
that's right. and here in Louisiana, you'd be swimming. But so the stigma of video games are always a negative thing. It's a waste of time. It's dulling your brain. It doesn't do anything. But actually, the games aren't always like that. They do bring camaraderie. People do play together, and it can be a fun thing to do. There's nothing evil in and of itself. Now, if you want to get into the science of what it's doing to your brain, that's fine. And probably hours on is probably not a good thing, every day. But here's the thing. This is why I wanted to talk about the stigma, because it is a thing in our society. Yeah. It is so widespread. Now that you have, I was going to pull out my cell phone, but it's not in here. We have so many games on the cell phone. We have gaming systems, online games. There are games everywhere. Yeah. Cheesy games to very in-depth games that can last for years and years and never end. So there's all types of games, and I'm sure there's children out there that are like, hey, I want to play a game, and mom and dad are like, don't know what to do. So that's why we're going to be talking about that, because there's not necessarily anything wrong with it. Your kids are going to want to do something. The point for us parents is to direct, is more to be involved in what they're doing, why they want to do this. So full disclosure, for us, that was never an issue. Our kids didn't grow up with video games. We didn't play video games in our house. We barely even had a TV. Right. So we've been given some consoles.
Yeah, consoles.
Some counsel on some consoles. Yeah. And so like we even have a Wii right now, the old Wii. And during holidays or birthdays or something, they'll go down and play like Mario Kart, or I don't even know what else we play.
Bowling.
Oh yeah, bowling. The Wii Sports. Yeah, that's right.
Wii Sports.
Yeah, so we do engage in some gaming at times as a family, and I would suggest that is the best way to do it, is to engage everyone. If like that's what we're doing, we're not just having a person in the bedroom alone. I was listening to this guy who is a gamer, and he was giving suggestions, and he was definitely saying, put it out in the living room. Right. Don't let them just play whatever. There are things to be aware of. There are bad games. Yeah. There are some really bad games. And if you're not aware of it, you need to be aware. Find out what your kids want to play. Go on YouTube or Twitch or something and figure out what's being played and what you can see what it looks like. And if you're uncomfortable, say, no, we're not playing that. But then there's give them an alternative if that's what their direction they like to do, something they like to do on their free time. Our kids just never were into video games, and we didn't really allow that, but every once in a while we did. But anyway, so that's kind of the stigma of video games, and but really it's what you're doing in your free time in general. We got media everywhere. Yeah. And so what does that look like, with Netflix and, movies and TV shows? And it's so easy for a preacher to get up there and just say, get rid of it all. You a bunch of losers if you're watching it or playing video games. You're a loser. Well, that's disingenuous. I mean, because that same guy would go spend the whole weekend hunting or away from the family. And so it's like, this is a reality of where most Americans are, whether we like it or not. Yeah. We have to figure out what to do with it. And so you're demonizing people that actually take pleasure in some of these things, and they don't have to be a loser. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So how do we tackle that? That is really the big question, right?
Yeah. Well, I think as parents, the big thing when it comes to, any of these things, but specifically games that we're talking about right now, is knowing the game and knowing what they're doing, knowing what they have access to. Like some parents will be like, oh, I didn't realize that there was like a whole chat thing, and I walked in and I saw, them reading whatever. And it's like, oh, I didn't know you could talk to other people. And so it's like, if you're going to let your kids play games, which I think can be fine, and, knowing what games they're playing and what they're being exposed to, but you need to know the game. You need to know what they can and can't do and what it looks like. And like you say, you can watch these things online. You can go to YouTube or Twitch or other things out there. You can watch the game being played. You can play it yourself. Right. If you're going to let your kids do it, it's something you need to educate yourself so that you know what's involved and what they're being exposed to.
That could be anything, really, especially at certain ages. And we early on didn't want our kids to watch movies or TV or video games early on in their development, mainly not because we wanted to be super spiritual, but it's just like, this is their creative time. They are developing their brain, and I don't want them just dumbing down watching TV or video games and stuff like that. Yeah. There's a time and place for that, and 5-year-old isn't that time and place, No. And so I don't want to be like a hypocrite and say, I can play games, but you can't. But I do think that in child development, that is a big deal. And if you're just going to plop them down in front of a screen, and you've heard the term screen time, and that is a thing. That is a real thing. Yeah. And for anybody under 10, I would question how much screen time they're getting at all. Like, let them be creative. Let them go out in nature. Let them do things with their hands. And there's always time to watch things. Trust me. As we get older and slow down, you want to watch something, fine, whatever. I'm not sitting here. We're not telling you to throw away the gaming system and throw away TVs and get rid of the movies and all that. But as a parent, we need to parent. We have to train our kids in these things. And so you have to understand the why they're interested in these games, because their friends are interested. And if it's like racing games, that's an easy one. You're like, well, there's a lot of but what if they're interested in like really demonic, things, you're like, well, why are you interested in this? Get to know their heart. And that goes for any board game, any kind of book, any kind of movie, or any kind of entertainment type thing that we run across, right?
Well,
go ahead.
At this point with games, though, there's also a lot of help online or books. Yes. This is a huge subject. And like you say, even in the secular world, everybody's talking about it. So get some books and find out what the dangers are, as far as addiction, as far as content, as far as whatever.
Absolutely.
So,
there's no
figure
excuse.
out and come up with a game plan.
Right.
So.
Well, most of the games now is something we didn't have to worry about when our kids were growing up. They're mostly online games.
Yeah.
Like with Jonathan and Andrew the girls didn't really get into it much. We played the Wii. Somebody gave us a Wii. But later, when I think they were 14, 15, maybe even 16, they had an Xbox.
But they bought it themselves, right?
Right, they bought
Saved
it.
Up.
Yeah. And then I'd go with them. They'd rent games. This is how much things have changed.
I know, right? Down to the Blockbuster.
Or they would buy the games. But anyway, there was no online. Like their Xbox, they wasn't connected to the internet. They would have friends over, and they would play in our living room because that's where the TV monitor was.
Right.
Wasn't even a TV because we didn't have TV service.
There was a screen.
Yeah, screen.
Some kind of
Yeah.
screen.
But it was so their friends would come over, they would play and have snacks or whatever, and then they'd go home. And
Yeah.
But it was, so the thing is now, it's all mostly online. There's a
Which
lot
can
of,
they have their own challenges
Right.
in themselves. Now, most games you can shut that off, especially if it's a console game. If it's an online game, you need to educate yourself.
Right.
You know, is it have a chat room? Does it
Yeah.
have all these things? And no kid should have that access. There are dangers.
Yeah.
Connected. Like same thing with social media, which we're going to talk in just a second here about. But the people, you've got perverts on the other side. You don't know who you're
Yeah.
playing with.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, in my world, I don't want our kids necessarily connected to the internet when they're playing games. If it's here locally in what they call like a LAN, it's just within the house, and maybe we can get on different computers,
Right.
sure. But let's play together, and you can always. It's always better to involve more people, and if that's what you want to do, it's not much more different than playing a board game or doing some other activity together. It's just that if that's all consuming, that's where it can be a big problem, and that's where the gamer label is where people are like, oh, he's just a loser, and I'm like, it's not the thing, just by playing a game, it's being all consuming, and anything that is all consuming is dangerous.
Yeah.
So that's really what you have to watch out for. And so as parents, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, do we want to give some of the things?
We can.
Well, as parents, we need to lay down some rules. Don't be afraid to, once again, it's either all or none. No. There's a big in between. Even people in the secular world understand limits.
Right.
And so we're not like prudes over here and like, oh, you're just conservative Christians. They're like, no. This is a legitimate issue everywhere. Kids just want to keep pushing. They'll play all day, but they'll play anything all day if you let them. And our kids would play Legos all day, and we had to be like, nope, okay, now it's time to read. Okay, now I don't know if they would have read all day, but maybe the
Some
girls.
of them, absolutely.
The girls might have.
Yeah.
But we control some of that, the time of what you're doing. Make it a reward. Don't make it a daily thing just because, you don't use it as a babysitter, basically.
Right.
Make it something that is an event. Like, this is what we do. We like to do this on Friday nights or Saturday nights or whatever nights you decide to do it, or every day. I don't know. But don't make it a babysitter so you can get rid of your kids. I think that's dangerous there. But have time limits. I like what that guy said. Write it out so it's clear. Like only an hour, or if we come in and say that's enough, that's enough.
Yeah, well, I thought that was really important because so often parents will talk to our kids about things, and we'll talk about, all right, we don't want you doing whatever it is so much, or we don't want you doing it in this room, or we don't want you, whatever it is. And I think oftentimes we talk and we feel like something's settled. Maybe they feel like something's settled, but then it's unclear. And so I do like the idea of writing out your rules, putting them somewhere, and they're probably going to change because your kids grow and through time it changes. But it's like they need to know because, at least for our kids, it's like they're good kids. They want to do what we want them to do. But sometimes it's like, well, I'm not really sure. Am I allowed to do this? Am I not allowed? So make it clear for your kids.
Yeah, make it clear, especially in that realm, because it can be very vague at times because it's always adjusting. And so just keep up with the adjustments. And I know that I think parents get lazy and they just the easy response is like, we're not doing that. That's just stupid. That's worldly. That's lazy. But that's being lazy. It's just saying no to everything. We need to learn to say yes to some things because it's not evil in and of itself. But at the end of the day, if you do your own study and you're looking at it and you're like, no, we're not doing it, there's no shame in that. Make that very clear. Right. Yeah. But you have to present that why it's so bad. In the same way that if my kid came up to me and said, hey, I want to get a gaming system, I'd be like, why? Why do you want to get a gaming system? And what do you want to play? Because I'm not necessarily saying no. I want to hear the why.
Right.
Why do you want to do this? And I'm like, it just doesn't sound like that's a good idea. And here's why. And maybe we can do this instead, and come up with something else. And there's plenty of other alternatives and that you can come up with. But there's something got in their heart somewhere So you have to figure out why they want to do X, Y, and Z. So you really have to understand your child. And, from Proverbs 20, what is that, 22?
Yeah.
Proverbs 22:6, which we all know, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
So we are to train our children, and that is a key thing, a key element here.
Which includes entertainment. Like we'd like to check out, like, okay, now this is just fun time.
Right.
So this isn't training time or this isn't whatever. But it's like, no, that goes 24/7, like the whole day. We're always training. So, and even with entertainment, we need to train them how to have fun responsibly and how to not go overboard. And
you can't be that parent that says, well, we're just not having fun. I mean, you can be the Maxwells if you want, but it's just like, the no fun family. But realistically, you're going to do something that's fun.
Yeah.
Some people might be into sports. Some people might be into gaming. Some people might be into puzzles and board games. And some people might like fishing and hunting. Yeah. Does one make one more legitimate than the other one? I don't think so. It's just that's what you kind of grew up with.
Right.
And so that's why I was saying at the beginning of the show, I grew up with video games. Now, I don't sit down there and play a video game system, the games. I do play sometimes on my phone, and it's maybe things maybe I don't like to play as much. Maybe Sarah's like, you play.
You're crushing that candy, huh?
That's right. But it can be a time waster, and that's the number one stigma of video games is it's a time waster.
Which is true. Sorry, I keep interrupting.
No,
it is true that it's a time waster, but the minute people want to raise their hand and say, "Oh, it's a time waster," it's like, well, but you spent 3 hours scrolling through YouTube videos.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I mean, you're right, that is a time waster, but before we're so quick to judge, it's like.
But we all justify the things that we like.
Exactly.
And so that's why don't demonize your child just because they might like something, and it might be a game or something like that, or sports, for a while. I mean, I grew up with sports, and when they were really young, I didn't want them playing organized sports because I knew what that world was like. And, and I don't know if that was a good call or a bad call. They turned out fine, so it seems to be a good call, but they are not very coordinated and not very good at sports. I mean, they're good at volleyball now, but we've let them slowly start playing sports and at the right age, but they're never going to make a living at it, but they can have fun at it. Right. And that's the point. Are they going to make a living playing video games? No, but is there a time where they may have some fun with it? There's nothing wrong with that. So you want to be careful not to demonize them, but at the same time, don't just let them play for hours or else they're going to be that loser that's going to be in the basement.
Well, I was going to say, you can incorporate these things as a family. You mentioned about hunting, fishing, or sports. You can do those as a family just as much as you can gaming.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want. I mean, I was never into it. Right. I played a few times with the kids.
It just wasn't your thing.
It wasn't. And they'd always beat me. I'd lose in like the first 2 minutes of the game.
But so anyway, that's specifically video games. But what we're talking about can be applied to just about any source of media.
Yeah.
But what we really want to get into that is very controversial is social media.
Yeah.
So you have video games, and yes, that's controversial too. But the social media one, we need to have answers for social media.
Yeah, because it's literally everywhere and everybody has access to it in some way. Right. And your kids are going to want to have access to it. And for oftentimes good reasons, it's like they want to keep up with their friends. They're doing Bible studies with them. Right. They're sharing verses with each other. They're encouraging each other. And you think, well, hey, that sounds like a good thing. Right. Sure. Why don't you, what app do you need on your phone? And you just let them have it. And it's like, which can be fine, but again, there is so much danger there. Yeah,
and this is where you can't be afraid to parent, because I was listening to the story of this family who he's a gamer. He is a gamer, and he was telling his story. But his 16-year-old daughter doesn't even have a phone, and not even a dumb phone.
Wow!
And they were thinking about getting her a dumb phone because she's 16, but they're not letting her have a social media account until she's 18. And she's the only one in her class that doesn't have a smartphone. And you might think, well, that's a little unfair. Well, these people Actually, it wasn't the gamer. This guy was, he's a doctor, and he has studied these things and the effects of social media, and all the data points to it is not good for kids at certain ages to have access to all these things. So you might as well wait until they're 18. But you got to talk about these things as you're getting closer to that. We didn't let our kids get on social media and have an account until they were 18. And most of them didn't really want one, maybe they're like, why can't we, we navigated those, but it was like, they didn't push it. And so it wasn't really a big deal until they got to 18. And then I think some of them have social media. I think they all do now. I don't know. Maybe Abigail doesn't. But anyway, that wasn't a big issue for us. We're also not in public school.
Right.
Where the peer pressure is very difficult.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Public school, you have a lot of peer pressure there.
Yes.
I mean, I went to public school. You did. But now you add social media on top of it, and it's astronomical, the peer pressure. We were talking about this before we started about the Tide Pod thing.
Yeah.
They were actually, that was a thing on, I guess it was TikTok.
Sure, whatever went viral.
Where people were eating Tide Pods.
It was a challenge.
Yeah, a challenge. And
stupid.
People were ending up in the hospital. It's like, well, you're eating soap. When I was a kid, you got fed soap as a punishment.
Yes, it didn't taste very good.
It didn't.
So what from a mom's perspective, what about social media? I mean, we have the good, the bad, and the ugly. We were talking about peer pressure and the herd mentality, but we were reading some things on the data of it. And so that was the problem with this. A lot of things, I don't want to sound like that old guy that is like, I'm not used to it, so therefore it's bad.
Right.
Kind of like people say about video games. Like, I don't know about social media, so it's all bad, and because I'm not familiar with it. But the data, so I was listening to a lot of people and their opinions, but it was a lot of anecdotal stories and just like, I don't like it because I don't like it. And I'm like, well, that's not good enough. And we need some real hard data. And you were saying that you were listening to someone talk about some kind of doctor who was talking about the effects in 2012 to 2013.
Yeah, because in 2012, the iPhone came out with the front-facing camera, I guess, which to me is like, who cares? But the whole world of selfies opened up. And they said if you watch the, if you look at the depression rates, in 2013, it just skyrocketed, as well as suicide. And so and it was not in our age people that were having these problems. It's in all these Gen Zers, I think they called them, whatever, young people. And so it's a very serious thing. Yeah. And again, in the secular world, people are like, oh, whoa, slow down. We need to get our kids off of all this social media.
Yeah.
And even like I was reading an article earlier and they were saying, well, if people know, and I mean, the data is all out there of the harmful effects of social media on young people. And it's like, well, then why doesn't somebody shut it down? And so they were comparing it to cigarettes, and they were saying it took decades and decades and decades for all the data to be out there enough before we finally said, oh, we're not going to do this in public.
Smoke in your lungs isn't very good.
Right. But I mean, they were going through the years, and I mean, it was many decades from when it, it was popular.
It was
and
a moneymaker too.
Well, that's the thing. Money was in it. Right. And of course, social media. Money's in that too. And so it's like, you think, well, if something's that bad, we're not going to let it just keep going. Actually, that's not the case.
If you can make money off of it, let's just keep it going.
So, I mean, it's just awful. I mean, just in the tiny, tiny bit of research that I was doing today, I'm like, oh, wow, like this is a whole world that, and even if today I study and it's like, okay, let me know what my kids have access to or whatever, and I talk to them about it and whatever, it's like a year from now, it's a whole different world again. Yeah, this isn't something a one and done, like, all right, let's just make our rules, put them on the wall, and we're good. It's like
changing constantly.
It is changing constantly.
There's new apps to counteract parents' attempts to
pretty much
keep up with their kids. And these kids are so ignorant of the ways of the world. In some respects, some ways they're very familiar with the ways of the world, but in these, you don't understand that these people are fishing for information. There's bad people out there that want to do you harm, and they don't realize that, and they're just thinking this is all fun. I mean, think about, like, for us, we all have social media accounts. and we post something on Facebook, and we're grown adults, and we get caught up with, well, I only got 2 likes on this one.
Yeah.
And if it feels better if all of a sudden I put a picture of my family and 150 people like it, and you're like, oh, I feel validated somehow.
Yeah.
But what if you put a picture of your family and only 2 people liked it?
You'd be like,
Yeah.
am I a loser?
Right. What happened? Because these are all artificial friends.
They are. Right.
For the most part. How many of those friends on Facebook and Twitter and all that do you actually know that you talk to on a regular basis? And that's kind of the artificialness of social media. It's contrived.
Yeah.
And that's a big, big problem with social media, is that it's not real. It's not reality.
No.
Yes, it's real pictures, it's real stories, but like one lady I was listening to, she went on vacation, it was a business trip, and they went to a beach, and everybody's taking pictures and having a good time, and she's like, most of those marriages were on the rocks. Everybody was having a miserable time, but for that quick second, we could smile and everything's great, and then all my friends know everything's great. And the running joke in our house is that if some couple puts like something on social media, like, my husband is the greatest husband, or my wife is just awesome, I'm like, they're struggling in their marriage, because usually I see like months later they're separated.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like, what happened?
Yeah.
I thought he was the greatest.
Yeah. Until he wasn't.
So we want validation, and that's what the kids are getting raised up in these with these social media stuff, and whether it's likes or friends or I don't know all the terms, that you get. Shares and
reposts.
You feel validated about yourself and somehow, or worse yet, you look at everybody else's life and your life is boring.
Right.
And in fact, 95% of your life is going to be boring. It's the mundane. That's where most of life is lived. I don't think you would want an exciting life. It would kill us. But most of it is a boring, mundane life.
Right.
I mean, living with you isn't boring, babe. But
it's not always that.
It's a routine.
Right. Yeah. You get a routine. Now, on the good part of social media, there is a good aspect to it.
There can be.
You can reach a lot more people.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you can stay in contact easier with distant relatives if you want. Or
and that's a lot of what we like to use it for.
Right.
I say we. I'm assuming that's what I don't get on very much. No. Sarah doesn't get on at all, and so we used it mainly for our camp.
Right.
For the show,
and
try to connect with people and stuff like that. So there are good aspects of promotion and things like that. But boy, oh boy, there's a lot of people will argue and fight, and it gets ugly. And I just don't. I don't have time for that. Like, why?
Yeah.
It is depressing sometimes. And like I was telling her, you're scrolling through her, as in my wife, you're scrolling through Facebook or whatever it is. And you're going from, the news in Israel with Hamas and all that, and people starving to death, and there's just the devastation. Then you go to someone's Thanksgiving turkey, and everyone's eating a lot of food. And how do you process all that where it's just miserable story, fun story, miserable story, fun story? It's just, how do we take it in? We get numb. We have to get numb at that point. So my suggestion was, I never had any social media on my phone. Like, I don't have Twitter or Facebook on my phone. I actually go to the computer, sit down to the computer. I know some people don't even have that anymore. But
What is that?
Yeah, I go to the actual computer. So I feel like when I sit down and I'm on my computer, like, this is what I'm doing right now. And yes, I can still waste time and all that, but I'm doing this. This is not something that carries with me everywhere I go. I'm alerted at every every update, every message. That would get annoying, and I have to cut that off. So I don't put any of that on my phone to be annoyed.
Right. Or where was that? It was somebody, they had Facebook, and they had the notifications on. So every time,
ding.
Yeah, it was
ding,
constant. I'm
ding.
like, that would be so irritating.
Yes, and we're like Pavlov's dog, and we want to. What is it? What is it?
You
what
hear
is
the
it?
ding. Oh,
Yep.
I'm like, turn that off.
Yes.
Well, and I think with social media, I was talking to the kids today about it, and it's not just like, they're kind of wondering, okay, well, what is it that would be bad for us to see? And we're just thinking of, big, bad, ugly, sinful things. And it's like, it's
right.
not.
They're like, oh, you don't want us to see pornography. I'm like, well, most of the time, that's not even the issue.
Right. I'm like,
Right.
no, that's not it. Or
It's
even
worldview issues.
Or exactly. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, okay, so I might see an outfit that somebody has, and I'm like, hey, Mom, can you take me to TJ Maxx so I can get this outfit or whatever?
Right.
Which I'd be like, no. But anyway, but it's not just that.
TJ Maxx
It's-
living it up.
That's right.
but it's not just, an outfit. It's like, I feel like it's kind of a slow wearing away of what you think about a lot of things,
Right,
about everything. And it's, you're just bombarded and you don't realize what the damage that it's doing to you.
Right. It's very subtle, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of studies out there. People are studying this thing because kids should not be on social media, that's for sure. I mean, the young age, like, what are you even talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
There are dangers out there. There are creeps out there. There are perverts out there. So you do have to be aware.
Yeah.
People are always getting hacked. And I remember one time, Michael Thornton is always like protecting us. And he's like, dude, get this off. Someone hacked in. And I'm like, they tagged your name. And you can't help when people tag your name.
No, you can't,
And
yeah.
it's hard to keep up with. And I'm like, you want to just get rid of it all, when all these creeps take over. But so that's social media. You have to have a plan.
Yeah.
You don't just say, okay, everyone else is on Facebook, so go ahead and just get it. There are apps where you can track what your kids are watching, who they're connected to. Sometimes if they need to contact someone, let them use yours, for a season. Until you work into that. But you have to talk about these things. Yes, they're going to seem like oddballs if they're the only ones that don't have it, but so be it.
So be
This
it.
is your kid's soul we're talking about.
Well, and I will say, especially for parents out there, I feel like we all think that we have great kids, and I do. I think I have great kids, but we all see our kids through rose-colored glasses, and we think, oh, my daughter, she just loves Jesus, and she really, this is not going to be, she's not going to fall into things that would be bad
Sin.
for her or sinful or whatever. Like, she's
Which is
very strong,
nonsense.
and it's great that you think good things of your kids.
Yes.
But don't give them access to social media because you think they love Jesus.
Let me
That's
ask
not
you a question. Who has more experience, me or my sons?
I think you.
Okay. Who is more godly, me or my sons? Now, that might be questionable, but I hopefully me.
Well, you've been in the faith a lot longer.
Right.
A lot more.
I've been a Christian more than they've been alive.
Right.
And so I understand all these things, and yet I am still tempted. I can be taken away and waste time and be tempted to look at things I'm not supposed to look at. So if I can be tempted and feel it and legitimately feel it, now I say no, but my kids who are inexperienced and younger, and we just expect they're gonna overcome this.
No,
This is ridiculous. This is a battle out there, people, and we have to be aware of what's going on because this is serious.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Right.
And if you're not prepared, you're going to be
We have to
overwhelmed.
have open communication with our kids. Just that's the big thing. And I think this is the good aspects of this is that if we use things like video games and social media and movies and entertainment stuff as ways to communicate to our children, then that's a good thing.
Right.
Because we need to feel where their heart is on this. And we're still the law of the house.
Yeah.
But we have to communicate these things like, why do you want this? Why are you interested in this? Why do you need to have a social media account?
Yeah.
Why do you need to play video games? Why do you need to do X, Y, and Z?
Well, like I heard someone say that in parenting, relationship works better than rules. And I
They
mean,
do.
I'm all for rules. And for some of these things, you absolutely do need to have hardcore rules. But what works even better is relationship and talking about the why and explaining, okay, this is why we don't want you to do this or why we only want you to do this so much or whatever.
Right. Because rules are easier.
Yeah.
It's just easy. It's like, don't do this. You can't do this.
Exactly.
And that's why we do it because, well, it's a baseline. And there's a time and place. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But when it comes to these nuanced things, then we need to talk to our kids about them, especially as they get older. 10-year-old wants a social media account? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, forget about it.
Right.
But as they get 16, 17, 8, and they keep pushing you, you need to have that conversation. Like, okay, maybe we do need to open this up, or maybe you don't, but you need to communicate, because one day they're going to be gone and they're going to throw themselves into this, and they're not going to know any of the dangers. They're not going to know. They're just going to go, my parents were prudes. My parents, they just, all this was evil and wicked, but it's not so bad. Because when you first get into it, it's not that bad.
No.
It's like, oh, it doesn't seem so bad. But you don't know the effects. You don't see the bad until it's too late, and then it's bad. It's really bad.
Yep.
It's sort of like the original story of Pinocchio with Pleasure Island, where they were actually turning into donkeys.
Okay.
They didn't realize it until, I don't know if you know the story.
Yeah, I know the story.
Yeah.
Right.
So they didn't really realize what was happening until it was too late. And once it was too late, it was
Too late. It's too late.
Pretty much. So I think the big takeaway is that you have to know what your kids are doing.
Yes.
And you have to educate yourself, and whatever you're going to allow them to do, then you're going to have to take the time to know everything that's related to that and everything about that, and to know your kid.
And you have the right to
part
say,
of it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be afraid to be a part of it, but you have the right to say no. And you have the right to say whatever. But we're saying that there's probably somewhere in the middle that is going to be beneficial.
Yeah.
And by just cutting it off and saying, no, we're losers do this, well, maybe have the conversation, because then they're going to be very judgmental of everybody else that plays video games or is on social media or watches movies or has a TV or you name it. Your kids are going to be very judgmental if they hear anybody that does any of that. And it's not always the case. Let's just put it that way. You have to know your kids, know their heart, and train them. Raise them up in the way they should go. And in the end, they won't depart from it.
Yeah.
And don't just say, no, I said so. That's the only reason you give. I mean, that works if your kids are 4, 5, 6. But if they're 13, 14 and up, that's not going to work. You need to have a valid reason for a no.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and also, I would say set the example. You know, if I'm sitting there and I spend 3 or 4 hours scrolling through Facebook, and I'm telling my daughters, I don't think you should get on Facebook. You'll just waste your time, whatever. It's like,
don't get on, look at this. This is not what you want to
Or
be.
if you sit there playing video games for 4 or 5 hours and you tell the boys, it's like, oh, I don't think that's good for you. It's like, okay, well, at some point we have to set the example.
I remember when I was a kid, my parents smoked, and they
Don't smoke. Kid.
Yeah, they'd always tell me
don't do that.
Yeah.
That hypocrite smokes 2 packs a day.
Didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it's this is we could actually talk about this subject a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe we should at some point, but there's a lot of things out there, a lot of helps for parents.
Yeah.
Seek it out.
Yeah.
We're just scratching the surface. There are legitimate apps out there. There's more professionals out there that are talking about this. We're just making this aware. There's a lot of parents that really don't know what they're doing. And there's a lot of parents that are wasting their time on Facebook instead of raising their kids.
Yeah.
Don't be a Facebook parent. Don't just take pictures and show them. Actually spend time with your kids. Your friends know that you love your kids. Okay.
Yeah.
But do your kids know that you love them?
Right.
So that's the more important thing.
Well, they should look at Facebook. Then they know.
You should follow me. So, all right. I think that's it for this segment. And if you have questions, or we can get specific in some of the other things that we've done, I'd like to hear some other suggestions. Maybe some people have done to kind of protect from some of those things, because this is a pretty big issue. So let us know. Email us, message us.
The Mike Charleston Show.
History with Larry.
All right, Larry.
All right.
This is
Thanksgiving history time.
History time on Thanksgiving. Last week was kind of Thanksgiving week, but this one we're recording right before. So anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, by the time this comes out, Thanksgiving will be over.
Yeah, it's all right, but it's still...
It'll be Cyber Monday.
It will be.
That's right. You can be thankful for all the stuff that you... Going to spend the day being thankful for all that you do have, and then wishing for all the stuff you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
that's the American way. Yeah. That's the American way. All right.
Speaking of which...
Okay.
This is a Thanksgiving story. This was actually Rush Limbaugh, for those who don't know. He was kind of the one person who saved talk radio.
Basically, I mean, he basically created what we know as talk radio and all that. So yeah,
kind of a shame. Well, and I think actually a lot of podcasts probably came from the talk radio genre.
Oh, sure,
to use a big word.
No, he was the king, and like him or not, you have to admit he started it. Basically,
he did.
So yeah,
a lot of people got their career from Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the Thanksgiving story from his second book. See, I told you so. Anyway, the story is, most people know the story of Thanksgiving is,
they sat down and watched football and ate turkey.
That's right. The Pilgrims and the Indians, they played football while the men played football while the women clean.
Right.
That's right.
Is that how that went? No.
But actually, a lot of people don't know that, like the Pilgrims, when they came over, we were just talking about this. They actually, it was hard. A lot of them didn't make it on the voyage over. A lot of them died seasick and this disease. And so, and then even when they got here, they couldn't land. There's weather. They're trying to find a place.
There were no docks.
Yeah, there wasn't a port that they could just go into.
Inconceivable.
Yeah, so they had to find a place.
They really should have kept going south, though.
They should have.
It's warmer. I don't know what time of year they were landing, but
it was getting pretty close to winter.
Yeah, I would have kept going to the Carolinas at least.
Yeah, Georgia.
Yeah,
Florida.
Right.
The land of flowers. But they ended up in Massachusetts. Yeah, of all places. Actually, when they got there, they ended up having to stay on the ship for longer.
Wow.
And which led to disease because food was running out.
Dysentery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Scurvy was a big issue with that. And anyway,
once again, go to Florida, eat some oranges.
Yeah. Where were you?
I know.
Hindsight's 2020. No, but they contracted with a company that was financing their voyage. In exchange, when they got here, they would set up shop basically and pay their debt back to the company.
Sure,
and all that.
Well, like who are their customers going to be? The Indians?
Well, that they would collect furs and things, and then they would
send them back to Europe. Yeah. Okay.
They the company that was financing wanted them to have sort of like a common storehouse, and that's what they set up. Now, most people think the Indians were the ones that saved them, and in some regards they were. And in fact, the Indian that actually came to them spoke English, because he had been captured, taken back to England for several years, and then he was able to make his way back to America.
What was his name?
I don't remember now.
It's too bad. He's forgotten.
I know. Anyway.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Squanto, I think. But,
okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it was.
He did go to Europe, right?
Yeah. Anyway, the problem was they had a common storehouse, which what happened is everybody got equal shares. No matter how much work you put in, you got the same amount back. And over time, as human nature is, we become lazy and like, why am I going to work any harder? All I'm going to get
because we got to survive, dude.
Well, it didn't work because most of them starved to death.
That's crazy.
William Bradford took over as governor, and he realized this ain't working. We're all going to die unless we change. And he did change. Mm-hmm. He assigned every family a plot of land. It said, that's your land. You're responsible for your own food.
Is that where the song came from? This land is my land. This land is your land.
So now everybody realized there is no common storehouse anymore. If I don't plant and I don't work, I'm not going to have food. And
you would think this would be a given, but okay.
You would think, but so when they realized that, guess what everybody did?
Flourished?
They planted extra.
Oh, they
wanted to make sure we're not going to starve.
The American way.
That's right. And so then next harvest season, guess what they had?
A bountiful.
A big harvest.
Yes.
A big harvest because they learned how to plant. Now, this is another thing people don't realize. These people were farmers in England.
We are London. Farmers.
Yeah, that's right. They knew how to raise crops, but when you go to a different place, different environment,
it's a little bit different.
Yeah. So
you know why? Because it's different.
That's right. So the Indians did help them in that regard and show them the best way to plant and
which
things.
is kind of interesting because Indians weren't really. Is it all right we call them Indians?
Native Americans.
Right.
The
only reason I called Indians because they thought they were in India.
That's right.
But anyways, the natives there they didn't they weren't most of them were they traveled.
Hunter-gatherers,
Yeah.
yeah.
They didn't really
Migrant.
settle down and plant and all that. They kind of let nature grow things, and then they would just go out and gather it and all that. So it's interesting. Must have been some of those tribes that actually planted.
Yeah, there were several that would actually stay there. They plant and harvest.
Right. Okay.
So because each family were given responsibility for their own
Plot of land.
And their own food, well, they actually said, well, we better start working. And so that's what happened with the first Thanksgiving was they had an abundance. They went from starving and almost dying out completely to flourishing within just a couple of years.
Yeah.
Because William Bradford realized this commune living doesn't work. So as we found out in the 60s and 70s again,
Yes.
it doesn't work.
It doesn't usually work out. So where did the
And
Indians
guess
come in?
what?
Did they invite them over?
Yeah, they were neighbors. They actually traded with each other and they had a good relationship. So
The first football game was the Patriots versus the Redskins?
that's right. That's right.
Okay, maybe not.
So that's a brief. You can find if you can find Rush Limbaugh's book. I'd recommend it. It's a good book. But this story, you can find the whole story online.
Yeah.
But it's a good tell of how economics still plays in part in our lives and our way of thinking. In fact, they were able to pay off their debt faster than they thought.
The East Indian
or whoever
Company,
it was,
whatever it was. Right.
Yeah, because they produced so much food.
I think it was Goldman Sachs.
I think so. Yeah.
So what you're saying is hard work pays off.
Hard work pays off, and individual responsibility and private property makes a big difference. That's right. So there we go. That's the real story
The real story.
of the first Thanksgiving.
I keep referencing the Hoops and Yo-Yo. If you gotta go look at Hoops and Yo-Yo, it's about a minute long. They tell a Thanksgiving story.
Thanksgiving
It's hilarious.
story in about a
That
minute.
is hilarious.
It's a minute long, and it's not true, but
But it is funny.
It's a little skewed.
It
They
is.
get some stories mixed up.
mixed up, which is what we love.
Yeah, that's right.
So, anyways, but thank you, Larry, for that Thanksgiving. Thank you for the Thanksgiving story.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
The Mike Charleston Show. Music with Sarah.
What song do you like?
All right, babe. This is your song of the week, and hopefully, people are encouraged by all your songs of the week.
Hopefully, there's a lot of good songs. So, I mean, I hope people listen and check them out if they
All
don't
right.
know them.
So
but-
this one is Christ, Our Hope in Life and Death, which is the one that we are showing today, is actually performed by Shane and Shane.
It is. It was done by Keith and Kristen Getty and Matt Papa in 2020 originally. And there are many versions out there, and I'm sure they're all good. But my favorite is the one on the Worship Initiative, Volume
20.
20.
Yeah, so he's
by
got a
Shane
lot
and
of
Shane.
volumes out there. But this is the Shane and Shane version. And so anyway, why do you like this one?
Well, I think the title pretty much says it all. Christ, our hope in life and death. And so that is the point of the song, is that he is our hope.
Right.
And I know recently we did a show about hope. And I think that's a huge thing in the life of a Christian, not only in death, because in death we hope for what's to come
Right.
with heaven, but he's also our hope in this life. And I feel like when we understand what he has to offer, not just for the afterlife, but for the here and now, it's amazing.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's very exciting. And so that's what it talks about, is what our hope is. And the second verse says, what truth can calm the troubled soul? What truth is that? That God is good.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes it's easy to think God is good when things go our way and when we get the raise and when our kid does get better and whatever. But God is good no matter what happens.
Right,
And
right. Good or bad, in our perspective, God is always good. So what he does is good.
Right.
And that's a good thing to remind us, even if a house floods or a house burns down or we lose our job or a loved one dies. You know, God is still good.
Yep. Then later on in the verse it says, who holds our faith when fears arise. And oftentimes in this life, when we do face those difficult times, fears arise, but we have a firm foundation. We have an anchor. He holds our faith when fears arise. And then it says, the last part of that verse says, who sends the waves that bring us nigh unto the shore, the rock of Christ. And I don't know, I think that's an amazing picture. You know, it's like he sends the waves, and like he does have all power, and he's able to do whatever, but oftentimes the things that we do face are used to bring us closer to him, and so that we'll draw near to him.
Right, absolutely.
So anyway, it's a great song, and obviously it ends with the last final verse is, unto the grave what shall we sing? Christ he lives, Christ he lives.
Right.
And the picture is we meet him one day. And so that is the ultimate hope, is meeting him face to face and being in heaven with him.
That's it. That's it. So that is Worship Initiative, Volume 20. You can look that up, Shane and Shane.
Yeah.
Or you can find the original Kristen,
they're all
Kristen
good.
and Keith Getty.
But if you haven't heard their version, you really should go check it out, because they do a pretty cool job.
The Mike Charleston Show. Marriage.
All right, babe. Speaking of the topic that we have today with video games and social media and just whatever media things, a lot of wives out there are probably tuned in, be like, yes, my husband does X, Y, and Z, right? What is the big question a lot of wives have out there?
How do I get my husband to do this less? How do I get him to grow up and stop playing his games, or to get off his phone, or to stop watching YouTube videos, or whatever? And many Christian wives, you know, they pray for their husbands to quit doing whatever. And, you know, so it's not necessarily always a bad thing. You know, I mean, they're hoping they want their husbands to seek God more and to spend more time with the family. But I will say that the trick here is that I think the enemy uses this against wives. And
why do you say that? I mean, I would agree, but I mean, because guys could flip the script too and be like, well, I wish my wife would stop doing X, Y, and Z
I'm
too.
sure.
But a lot of guys don't, they just probably don't care as much, maybe. That's harsh, but women do care. And so why would you say what you said?
Well, the thing is that I think that the truth of the matter is that if your husband quit playing his games, or if he quit watching YouTube videos endlessly, or he quit whatever it is that you don't like that's related to some of these topics we're talking about today,
he'd probably find something else.
He would find something else. And if we backed up the clock, to 1950, the wives are complaining because their husband comes home and plops himself in the chair and is just reading the newspaper.
Reads the newspaper.
And it's like,
what is a newspaper?
Something they used to have a long time ago. Yeah. But it's like we just think that if he would stop this, then it'd be better. Then, our family would be better. Then
if he turns off the TV, if he does this, it's never ending at that point. Right. Basically, what you're saying is, I want him to do whatever I want.
Yeah, basically.
And then I'll be happy.
Yeah, we don't want to say it like that. We try to dress it up with pretty Christian lingo, and I'm just praying that he'll just get closer to God, which you should. I mean, that's a great thing to pray. But it's more of I have this need to control, and that's wrong. And I think if wives could realize okay, it's not my duty to control you. Yes, I can pray that you'll be drawn to God, and that's a great prayer for wives to pray. But instead of, it's really a selfish prayer, because it's I want you to help me more. I want you to be more involved with the kids so I don't have to do as much. I want, and it's if our prayers are out of selfishness.
I mean, they're not bad prayers. I mean, to want your husband involved is not a bad thing.
Right, of course.
I mean, that is the issue. But it's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not refreshing, but it's just sweeter when you see God moving on your spouse, whether it's a husband or wife, in that matter. But if for that matter, if a husband is being convicted instead of being nagged into quitting or doing something, or pulling back a little bit on some things. He's spending too much time hunting, fishing, or going, working in the garage, or playing video games, or on social media, or whatever he's doing on the phone. Whatever those things are, if the Holy Spirit is gripping his heart, he's going to want to follow through with that more than just trying, the wife just saying, can't you just stop? Can't you just stop? He's thinking, why can't you just stop? And just honestly, I mean, it's okay, you're making me seem like a really bad guy because I do X. And I'm like, I do this, I do that. And there's some cases where he probably is a bum. There might be a bum out there. But women hear stories and they hear a preacher, and a preacher will say something about a negative comment about a guy playing video games as a bum. And so then they look at their husband, who he might even just play one game a day or something, or not even day. He spends his Saturday, he wakes up and he plays a game, and he's called a bum, and he feels like that's not justified. Like, I've done this, I go to work, I'm spend time with the kids, and there's just something I'd like to do every once in a while, and now I'm a bum. That doesn't make him feel like, hey, let me just come out of that criticism and conquer this. And he's probably going to make him retreat further and be like, you already think I'm a bum. I don't think I'm a bum, but I'm not going to be motivated to keep doing what you want, because we know there's more to come. It's not just this. There's the next thing. It's the next project. It's the next thing on the list. And you say, well, isn't that what a husband's supposed to do? Sure. I mean, there's things that we need to do. But a woman, what would you like? And I'm not talking to you, but women out there that are listening, how would you like it if all we treated you was a list of things to do in the house? Like, hey, do this, do this, do this. You wouldn't appreciate that either. But it feels like guys are nothing more than just a checklist to get things done. And then if they ever take a break, if they're not pulling their weight, supposedly, we're bums. And we don't like that. We don't like that. Is it true that guys probably do play too much video games or on YouTube videos? And we are inclined to throw ourselves into different kinds of hobbies and things like that. We like to throw ourselves into things. So if we can get redirected, that would be better. But just to tell us to quit and stop, and your goal is to get us to stop doing that. It's unrealistic for your husband to come home from an 8-hour, 10-hour day of work and just go pray and read his Bible
and sit and read stories to the kids, and then wash dishes with the kids, and then
it's just totally unreasonable. That we are talking about a man, and so however he likes to relax a little bit, and sometimes people will view certain things as more acceptable. Well, that's your problem. That's if I wanted to just play a game for a half hour, or go through social media for a half hour, or go hunting for a half hour, or go fishing the point is it's a half hour, and no matter what we do, you're not going to be happy. If you're not going to be happy with that, then you're not going to be happy with anything, right?
Pretty much. And wives need to learn to be content with what they have, and to pray that God will draw your husbands, and all of those things are good.
Absolutely.
But in the meantime,
talk about it too.
Talk about it and look for things that you can praise him for, and thank him, and thank God that, hey, you maybe did do whatever I'm praying that you'll stop doing or whatever, but you did also do this with the kids, and you did also take time to, do, there are many things we can look for that we can be thankful for positive. That'll change our attitude, instead of just looking at, oh, here he goes again.
Yes.
So.
And there needs to be a word said to men that, look, you do need to grow up. You do need to, as we've been talking about in the whole show, there are times where you can indulge and play a video game, or get on social media, or get on YouTube, or watch a movie or something. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if it starts taking over your responsibilities, you do have responsibilities at home. You have to remember that the buck stops with you, and you are to step up. And if things aren't getting done, you can't just blame your wife or the kids. You have to blame yourself. You're the CEO. So you got to do something with that too. So it goes both ways, but in this particular scenario that you created for the wife, it does seem like they do complain about that way more than guys would.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, this is Joshua Charleston, the producer of The Mike Charleston Show. Thank you for listening to the show. If you want to follow us, we're on Facebook at Mike Charleston Show and Instagram at _Mike Charleston Show. Please support us on Patreon for exclusive content. This episode is over, but if you want more, check out the website at fellowshipofbelievers.org for more information. The Mike Charleston Show has been brought to you by Fellowship of Believers.